Let's get to a 2019 piece, because you do see some really concerning trends that you talk about in that piece, and it's titled "The Need to Presume Good Faith in Campus Conversation." So while I have just said, it doesn't seem that bad here at NDSU, and 99% of conversations are good, the ones that make the headlines, like all news, are the really, really bad ones. And you talk in that piece a little bit about the suspension of openness and people not even being willing to come to the table with curiosity, a desire to learn, and they've made up their minds before ever entering dialogue. So we're getting to the foundational issues here that you raise of this is an ambitious project to allow discovery to come about in the academy through challenging ideas, allowing for open inquiry, and you being uncomfortable, but at minimum being curious and open-minded to someone else's point of view. What is your advice for people who really, really, like, I want to walk that walk and be really open-minded and, engage someone who I fundamentally disagree with, but it's hard. It's like a really heavy lift because, like, we're economists. There are certain things that we think are like the laws of economics, and you want to just say, no, that's really not true, and I'm going to go back to my office now, as opposed to try to understand another person's point of view. So what is the like the recipe for just maintaining and advancing dialogue with someone who's just not even in the same mental model as you?
Yeah, I think that's the language of recipe is valuable, because and like any recipe, you can riff off of a recipe in several different ways. But one variation of the recipe is when you encounter someone who just comes at an issue just from a completely different perspective, and it seems like there's not even a common language. Even though you're both speaking the same vernacular, you're not really speaking the same language from a disciplinary perspective. And so the shift I try to make in my own mind in those moments is to ask myself the question, okay, Scott is here. I know that Scott is a thoughtful, intelligent human being, and yet he's looking at the same world I'm looking at and coming away with wildly different conclusions than I came at. Why? How can that possibly be? And not how can that be? He's so narrow-minded. How can that possibly be? But a genuine, open version of the question that says, how is it possible that Scott and I are looking at the same world and he's coming away with radically different conclusions? I want to understand that better. And so the exercise is not one in which, especially if it's sort of an underlying long-held belief, I doubt that you're going to persuade me suddenly that prices suddenly don't work, right? Or that demand curve slope upward. You're not going to persuade me of that. But still, there's something that you may be seeing in the world that is informing your perspective that I don't understand. And so if all I do is come away from the conversation understanding better why this really smart person sees the world differently than I do, and understand that there's a kind of rhyme and reason behind that perspective, that's a win, right? I mean, so that's a win. And if you can then explain it back to them, that's even better, right? Because then that's going to be the thing that allows you to have the next conversation. And the goal of every conversation shouldn't be that I try to persuade you or to come over to my point of view. That may happen, especially, but it's not going to happen in one fell swoop. And if it does, and even if it doesn't ever happen, you now have come away from that relationship understanding more deeply why some people see the world just so starkly different. And if you're a scholar, that makes you a better teacher, right? So I may never persuade Scott, but if I understand how Scott's perspective is probably informing other people's perspective as well, that makes me a better teacher. And so really trying to understand the wisdom that people bring with them into any conversation is a place to begin. And it's a posture of humility that we should all be entering into our conversations with.